Hi, my name is Christine G, and I'm going to be going over this lesson on solving equations. One thing I like to tell students to keep in mind is that your primary resource should always be the learning resource that we have, and working in there regularly should be your best way to complete any assessments here. So with that said, we're going to take a overview look at solving equations, and this won't cover everything, but it'll give you a good start so that you can complete anything on solving equations in the resource. So here for problem number 1, we have we're asked to solve for x on 1 and 2. I didn't write that out there though. So we're solving the equation, so we're going to get x equals something. And what we want to do first is simplify so that we can solve for x. So first of all, inside the parentheses, we can't simplify any further because we don't have like terms. So then this is the same as a -1 if there's no other number there and the sign is negative. And we multiply -1 by each of the terms. We distribute them. So we get -2x, and then -1 times 4 is -4 equals, and then 2 times 6 is 12, and then 2 times -4x is -8x. Now what we can do next is simplify by getting our x's together on one side. So let's add 8x to both sides. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other to keep the equality. Equation is like a teeter-totter. If I add something to one side, 8 pounds to one side, I have to add it to the other to keep the balance or the equality. So here I have -2x and plus 8x. Different signs, so I subtract and I come out with 6x minus 4 equals 12. -8x and 8x is just 0. So 0 and 12 is 12. Now I want to get x by itself, so I add 4 to both sides. And then I'm left with, I'm going to write it over here, 6x equals -4 plus 4 is just 0. So we just have 6x on the left equals 16. And then I divide both sides by 6. 6 divided by 6 is just 1, or 1x, which is x equals, and then 16/6. Well, I know that they have, there's 2 is a common factor. So then I get 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 8/3. And it could also be written as a mixed number, which would be, let's see, 2 and 2/3. So either one of these answers would be correct. Okay. So I had a mistake on this problem, so I am going to go ahead and redo it, and hopefully it makes sense. So here we have an equation with fractions. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to remove the fractions to make it easier to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply through by 6. Why 6? Because it will cancel out all of the denominators. And if I just I could multiply by 3 first and then 6, but this will get them all in one full swoop. So 6 times 1/3, and I'm allowed to do this in an equation because an equation is like a teeter-totter. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So if I add 6 to one side, as long as I add it to the other side, I keep the equality or the balance. Or if I multiply by 6 on one side, I have to multiply everything through by 6 on both sides. So here, and I'm just putting the 6 and over 1 so that it's also a fraction, and then I can show how I cancel. And 6 divided by 1 is the same as 6. I'm just writing 6 in fraction form. So the first thing I can do is I can cancel this. 3 divides itself once, and it goes into 6 twice. 2 times 1 is 2, and then 2 divided by 1 is just 2. Here, I'm going to cancel out 6 divided by 6 is just 1. And then I have 1 times 5x divided by 1 is just 5x. And then here, I'm going to cancel out 3 divides itself once and goes into 6 2 times. And then I have 2 times 4, which is 8. Now I have a regular equation where I can solve for x, and I want to get x equals something. I don't know what it'll be. So then I want to get x by itself, or the 5x by itself at first. So I subtract 2 off both sides. The reason I do that is because I want this to go to 0. And it certainly does. 2 minus 2 is 0, and then I'm just left with 5x equals 8 minus 2 is 6. So I have 5x equals 6. I don't care what 5x is. I want to find out what x is equal to. So right now this x is being multiplied by 5, so I do the opposite and I divide it by 5. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other to keep the equality. And then 5 divided by 5 is just 1. 1 times x is x. And x is equal to 6/5. Perfectly reasonable, acceptable answer. Now, I can also write this as a mixed number. Either one would be acceptable. So if I want to write it as a mixed number, I can do what I call the old school division, where I take 5 and I divide that into 6. So 6 divided by 5, 5 goes into 6 one time, and then I subtract that off. And I get a remainder 1. And I would put that as 1 1/5. So either one of these are perfectly acceptable answers. Okay, so now this next problem is a word problem. And it talks about a rectangular deck, including a railing around it that is the perimeter of 300 feet. So let's about that. And then we have that, let's say that this is the length and then this is the width. And this is also the length and also the width. And we have that the length is 4 times the width. So let's put L for length, and it equals 4 times W. And we have that the perimeter is 300 feet, and the perimeter is equal to 2 times the length, because there are 2 lengths, or we could just say length plus width, or 2W, 2 times the width. And now we can, we'll just call width W, and we will put in for the length, we'll substitute with 4W so that we can be able to solve this, so that we can solve it. And the perimeter, we were told, was 300 feet. So now I can simplify this, and I get 300 equals 8W plus 2W. So I just multiplied the 2 times the 4W, and that's 8W. And then I can add these. These are like terms, so I get 300 equals 10W. And then I don't care what 10W is. I want to find out what W is, so I divide both sides by 10. And then I get W is equal to 300 divided by 10, 30. And then I can now find the width. I'm sorry, this is the width, 30 feet, and now I want to find the length. Well, I know that the length is equal to 4 times W, and W is 30, so I just say length equals 4 times 30 feet, and so the length equals 120 feet. And hopefully this transition goes well. Is about, oops. Too far. Okay, so we have this Pontiac GTO, which I used to drive as a teenager, and a Camaro Z28, and they leave the station at the same time and travel in the same direction. The Pontiac is going pretty fast, 70 miles per hour, and the Camaro is going 60 miles per hour. So they maintain radio contact within a range of 40 miles. When will they lose contact? So we want to figure out when their distance apart is 40 miles. So in order to figure that out, when you think about it, if we had the Pontiac traveled 120 miles and then the Camaro traveled 60 miles, let's say, I'm just making numbers up. These aren't actual numbers. We would subtract them to find out the distance apart, okay? And that would be the method we're going to use here. So the Pontiac, so the distance for the Pontiac, I'm just going to put P distance minus Camaro distance equals 40. So we want to know when we subtract those two distances, the mileage is 40, so that they're 40 miles apart. So here, the Pontiac distance, well, we know that the Pontiac is traveling 70 miles per hour. So after 1 hour, the Pontiac's traveled 70 miles. They'd be 70 miles from the start. And then after 2 hours, 140. So we'll put 70 times x, and we're going to let x equal hours, the number of hours that they've traveled. So 70 times x will give us the distance minus of the Pontiac, the distance of the Camaro, which is 60, times x. And we want to see when these two equal 40. When the difference of these two equals 40. So 70x minus 60x is 10x, which equals 40. And then we divide both sides by 10. And then we get x equals 4. So after 4 hours, they will lose contact because they will be 40 miles apart. So it's not so bad if you break it down, think about it a bit in the beginning, set it up, how it makes sense. You can use numbers to play around with what would make sense, and then go ahead and do, set up the way you're going to solve it. But using numbers just to give you a feel for it, not the actual numbers, but just to see where how to get that 40 miles and what would make sense, and subtracting the two would give the distance apart. So hope that makes sense. Now here we're asked to solve for x, and we're going to be multiplying 4x and distributing it to each of these terms. So 4x times 6x is 24x squared. Remember, x times x equals x squared. Just like 5 times 5 equals, it doesn't equal 5, it equals 5 squared. So we have 24x squared minus 36x equals 0. And then what I just noticed is I'm going the wrong way with this. It's already factored out. We're solving for x. So let me go ahead. I unfactored it. Big mistake, because I'm going to have to factor it again. So let me go ahead, and all I have to do is solve for x. So what I do is I say, if this 4x is equal to 0, or if this 6x minus 9 is equal to 0, then this equation is true, and I've solved it. So I set 4x equal to 0, and then I also set 6x minus 9 equal to 0, and I solve for x on each of these. And then I get x equals 0, and here I get 6x equals 9. Divide both sides by 6, and then I get x equals 3 divides 9 3 times and goes into 6 twice. So x, the values for x are 0 and 3/2. Sorry about that. I started us off on the wrong foot. Now this one we're going to have to factor. That one was already factored for us. So here and if you aren't familiar with factoring, please review the resources, and there is another video that is on factoring where I go over that in depth. So please review that. So here what we do is we first look for a greatest common factor of all the terms. There isn't one. There isn't a factor that's common besides one on each of the terms. So then what I do is I say, okay, I know that S, this is a trinomial, S times S is S squared, okay? And this is the way I'm going to factor my trinomials. So then I look at the factors of negative 12 that add up to be negative 4. So the factor of the last term that multiply to give me that term, and then when I combine them are negative 4. So let me think about this. So negative 6 times 2. Negative 6 times 2 gives me negative 12, and when I combine these, I get negative 4. So it would be negative 6 plus 2 equals 0. So I've factored this, and so now I can solve it. So if this is equal to 0, or if this is equal to 0, then this whole thing is true. So I set each equal to 0, each quantity, and I solve for S. I get S equals 6 on this one, and S equals negative 2. So those are my answers, and they're both just what S is. They're not, it's not a point. These are what the value of S is. So we don't have, we just have one value. So, and these are both valid for what S can be to make that equation true. Okay, so now this next one, we have some denominators here that we're going to want to get rid of. So I would factor this one, x squared minus 9. So I know that x minus the quantity, so the quantity of x minus 3 times the quantity of x plus 3 would be what I get when I factor this one out. So now I have 8 divided by the quantity of x plus 3 equals 2 over the quantity of x minus 3 times the quantity of x plus 3. So now I want to get rid of my denominators, so I'm going to multiply both sides by x minus 3 times the quantity of x plus 3. 1. And then I cancel out. I get 8 times the quantity of x minus 3 equals, and then this cancels with this, cancels out nicely, and I'm just left with a regular equation to solve. So now I want to distribute the 8. So 8 times x is 8x, and then 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. And this equals 2. And I add 24 to both sides. And I get 8x equals 26. So all my answers are fractions on these problems. It's good. So it'll be harder than hopefully the ones you have to work on. And then I divide both sides by 8. And then I get x equals, now I know 26 and 8 are divisible by 2, so I divide the top and the bottom by 2, and I get x equals 13/4. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's see, I've got another word problem here. Selena takes 4 hours to paint a room, and it takes Joby 6 hours to paint a room. If they work together, how long will it take them to paint the room? Okay, well, I know that if Selena paints, I'll put Selena if she paints for 1 hour, I know she will have painted 1/4 of the room. And then if she paints for 2 hours, that would be 2 times 1/4. And that's how much of the room she would have painted. And then I know, let's see, Jovi, if he paints for 1 hour, that's equal to 1/6 of the room. Then for 2 hours, that would be 2 times 1/6 of the room that he's painted. So if they paint together, so then we could look at, it would be, they paint together and Selena paints 2 hours and Jovi paints 2 hours, then we would add these together to figure out how much of the room they've painted. So, and if they painted for 1 hour, it would be 1/4 plus 1/6 would tell us how much of the room they've painted. Now, we want to figure out when they've painted the entire room. So we want this to equal 1. And then we're not sure how much time it'll take. Here we were saying for 1 hour it would be 1/4. For 1 times 1/4. For 2 hours it would be 2 times 1/4. So it's changing, it's varying. The hours can vary. So let's say that H equals hours, and we're multiplying 1/4. This was how much they painted after 1 hour each. So 1/4 times T plus 1/6 times T. And then what we can do here is we can add these together. So, well, there are a number of things we could do. We could go ahead and get rid of the denominators. Maybe we should do that first. And we could get the least common multiple. Or you could say 6 times 4 is 24 and multiply through both sides by 24. Or I noticed right away 4 and 6 are both both factors of 12. So I can multiply both sides by everything on both sides by 12. So here we go. 12 times 6t equals 12 times 1 is 12. So I'm just going to put the 12 there. And then here I'm going to be canceling out 12 times. Okay, so sorry for that interruption. So here what we're doing is we are going to go ahead and cancel out our common factors. So here 4 goes into itself once, it divides 4 once, and it divides 12 3 times. So then we're left with 3 times 1 times t, which is 3t, plus here we have 6 divides itself once and it goes into 12 twice. 2 times 1 times t is just 2t equals 12. And then we have 3t plus 2t is 5t is 12. And then we divide both sides by 5. And this cancels out. And then we get t equals, let's see, we can rewrite 12/5 as a mixed number. So it would be 2 and 2/5. So how long will it take them to paint the room together? The amount of time would be 2 and 2/5 hours. So I hope that makes sense how we got to the formula in order to get the work combined to see how long it would take to paint that room. Okay, now this is the last problem. You notice we're going to be using PEMDAS. We always use PEMDAS in math. And we have it on some prior videos. So please be watching those for real numbers, I think whole numbers, different areas where we do have PEMDAS if you need a review on that. So first, parentheses and grouping symbols. So the square root sign is considered one of those. So what we can do here is on both sides, we can square both sides, because if we square both sides, then it will just get rid of the square root signs. So we square this side and square this side. And then we end up with 4y minus 6 equals 2y minus 5. And then I add 6 to both sides. And then I get 1. And then this is positive 1. 2y equals 4y. And then I subtract 2y off both sides. And I come up with 2y equals 1. Then I don't care about what 2y is. I want to figure out what y is. So I divide both sides by 2. And then I get y equals 1/2. And that will be our answer. So that is it. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Thanks for watching. Bye.